Hello. When I was 17 years old, I was in the kitchen with my mother, and I remember me announcing to her that we didn't have culture. Other people did, other groups did, but we didn't. We were normal. And it makes me think about why I would have even said that we don't have culture. Given that I'm a sixth generation Australian with an Anglo-Celtic background, I had culture. I just didn't have to go around my day having to define myself or justify my cultural background. That's the privilege that comes with being in a majority group, isn't it? I was so far removed from what being Australian meant to me in terms of my views, my worldview, my relationships with others, my style of communication, my relationship with the land, so far removed, that really all I could tell about Australian culture was the stereotypical: beers, barbecues, beaches, and not much more. I could in fact attribute more about my star sign being Sagittarius to my personality than I sort of knew about the influence of what it meant to be an Australian. A year goes past and I turn 18, and now I'm contemplating a very, very different decision about a shift in my identity. I changed religion. Most people when you're 18, you're thinking about what outfit to change. I'm changing my whole spiritual outfit. And it became very, I guess, awakening to me after I decided to also put on the hijab. I now became not from here, but from somewhere else. In supermarkets, people would come, just random strangers would come up to me and say, "Are you Lebanese? Are you Algerian? Are you Turkish?" And I go, no, I'm Australian. No, I'm sixth generation Australian. And having just to say this over and over again to random strangers when I had never been placed in a position to have to do that before, and at that time I hadn't even gone overseas to have to get the opportunity to say I'm Australian. But at that time I'd never received so many messages from people and even the social world about what it was to be culturally different up until that moment. The headlights went on for me to the fact that I am a cultural being. I just didn't realise it. And as I said before, that's the privilege that comes with swimming in the majority, being a part of a dominant group. But what it did for me was a couple of things. Yes, it gave me cultural self-awareness. Well, starting me on that journey, I don't think we ever stop finding out who we are or the layers of who we are. And the other thing that it did was it helped me to connect with other groups for the first time. I saw culture. I just had a thing, perhaps being colourblind, where I just didn't see culture. I just treated you as you are, just like a human being with good intentions. And what we do is we minimise culture when we don't see. And what it also did was spark an insane curiosity in me to delve more deeply into what cultural similarities and differences actually mean. And today that's what I'm here to share with you, is some ideas about culture, and hopefully by the end of it getting you to see yourself as cultural beings and to spark a little bit more of a curiosity to see what's right in front of you, in fact what's right around you in the room today. I'm going to show you some images to get you to start thinking about culture. So here we have some fish. I mean, they're multicultural fish, that suits our audience quite well. And what's the metaphor behind this? Like a fish to water. So we're swimming in something and it's just invisible to us like water. I often describe culture like wearing sunglasses on our head. You forget that they're there. And you're like, where am I? Oh, they're on. Okay, they're on. And that's culture. It doesn't matter what cultural background you have, you just do what you do. You make decisions, you go about your day, you think, you see the world in a particular way, you communicate. You don't realise you're even doing it, and you certainly don't realise it's part of your cultural background. I attributed all of that to my individuality. Let's have another look at a different picture. Like a fish out of water. Definitely how I felt when I first put on hijab, like a fish out of water. Even though it was such a committed, passionate decision of mine to do so. But like a fish out of water, I felt. But there's another meaning for this metaphor which I particularly like, which says, a fish doesn't know it's in water until it jumps out of it. Yeah, a fish doesn't know it's in water until it jumps out of it. You don't realise how Australian you are until you go overseas. And I don't mean Koodabarli with all the other Australians. You need to go a little bit more remote than that. Yeah. going overseas and having, or even just being local. It could be in your workplace, you could be a minority, you could be the token female on a board. But having that experience of a minority is a catalyst for some level of self-awareness if you choose to look. Speaking of going overseas, last year my husband and I took our kids to Turkey. I'd been there a few times before. My kids had not. And we were at a resort, which was quite lovely, and we were doing breakfast with all the other tourists, local and international. And as I'm sitting there, because I'm such a geek and so fascinated about culture, I'm observing. I'm observing how other families are doing breakfast. And what I notice is that all the very visibly white Anglo families from perhaps European countries, they're all individually serving themselves, putting plates for themselves with one of this, I'll have one of that. And this is what it sounded like for me and my kids, being from that demographic. What do you want for breakfast? Cereal. Which cereal? Which one? Oh, maybe I'll have eggs. Oh, I don't know about that. Okay, maybe I'll have gossamer. Well, it's not the same as back at home at Preston Market. It's not the same. You can have it. Okay, maybe I'll have toast. Okay, toast. Okay, 2 pieces. Are you sure you're going to eat that? You can see how many decisions that are going on right here, but I'm allowing and enabling my children to make these decisions as we're there for 5 minutes and I'm getting very hungry. Okay. But what I noticed was different was how the Turkish families and even Chinese families were serving their breakfast. They'd be sitting at a table, there'd be 1 designated or 2 designated adults, and they would go up to the breakfast buffet and they would get plates of like produce, small plates of olives, tomatoes, simit and pastries, cold meats, cucumbers, dip, big pot of tea, and take it back to the family to share in collectively. So what am I seeing here? I'm seeing individualism and collectivism playing out in front of me. What's that? It's the way that we organise ourselves in groups. It's a little bit like this. We raise our children in very individualist countries such as the US, the UK, New Zealand and Australia in a way that enables them to feel that they have a greater sense of independence, as opposed to collectivist groups which are predominantly from across Asia, Middle Eastern countries, some European countries that have high level of collectivism according to Hofstede's dimensions. And there's a high level of interdependence, close-knit families. And that's reflected in breakfast. But why is it so important to know about cultural differences and similarities? To reduce unconscious bias? Yeah, it's a popular phrase right now, to reduce unconscious bias. To reduce what we don't know, unconscious incompetence. Perhaps in a workplace that's a good setting. We don't know what we don't know. We might be offending people and we don't even know because people are polite and they're not going to tell you necessarily, unless it's a really big stuff up from a business point of view, or you're seeing something and it causes a relationship breakdown. What we tend to do is we minimise culture, we minimise the influence of differences because we interpret each other's thoughts and opinions through our own lenses. And if we minimise, we don't see culture, but we can also exaggerate it. So if I had a conversation with you, you might go, oh, Monique's she's just like me. And you don't even see the fact that I'm wearing a hijab. You don't use that as a cue to tell you that I'm Muslim and maybe I see the world slightly different to you. Or you exaggerate it and all you see is my hijab. That's all you see. And now you have a whole lot of judgments and assumptions about who I am as a person. It only takes one piece of information to help us to think about that we could get things wrong. Here's a company. They're trying to sell cola. They produce a really big billboard and put it on the side of the road. What's the message being said? And you can call it out. What's the message being said to sell this cola? Gives you energy. What else? It hydrates you. Okay. Which way did you read the message? Left to right. Now, that didn't... This billboard was actually in an Arabic-speaking country. So what was the message? You're running, you find cola, you die. one piece of information. We don't all read the same way. We don't read social cues the same way. We are culturally influenced. It comes into our language. Did you know that the way we write emails is culturally influenced? The way that we communicate to each other is culturally influenced. So for example, this is a lovely visual demonstration of how we speak to each other differently at times, and it can be gendered and it can also be cultural. You might think of someone in your world who's very direct. If we're too direct, what are we? A bit blunt. But direct communicators are also quite task-focused. So in an email, that's me. It's totally me. I forget the hi, how are you? I go, okay, so we need to solve this problem. What's happening with blah? And hi, how are you? Let me soften that. Okay, I have to be more conscious to be a little bit softer in my directness. Yep. And on the other side here, we have indirect communicators where if in an email, it might be, oh my God, what are they trying to say? Can you get to the point? Is there a point? When are you going to get to the point? The indirect communicator is actually just building relationships with you. You see that they might be beating around the bush, but no, they're just trying to get to know you and to build a relationship so that they trust you. There's so many things that are right in front of us, but we don't understand the differences, and when we don't, we put it down to intellect or personality or mood. Think about how you do this in a team. He's just in a bad mood. I just don't get the way that this person's speaking to me. I don't understand them. Okay, what's wrong with me? It's not. There are layers of culture. We've got to go below the surface, below what you see, to things like cultural dimensions. If you've heard of IQ, ISS for IQ, it's our cognitive intelligence is relatively stable over time. You might have heard of EQ, emotional intelligence, our ability to participate effectively in relationships. And as we know, just hanging around other human beings doesn't give you high IQ. And being in close proximity to people from multicultural backgrounds does not give you CQ, cultural intelligence. Cultural intelligence is a measurable capability to function effectively across various cultural contexts. For so many years, people were so interested to know about who I am and what it is to be Muslim that I went around doing cultural awareness seminars. Let me tell you about me. But did that change the relationship? Does that change the relationship between me and you, for you to know more about me? Yes, a little bit. But if I dig deep to find out in clinic about who a husband is, for example, just knowing about him, does that change the nature of the couple? No, it doesn't. You have to see yourself as part of a dynamic, and that's why I love the concept of cultural intelligence. It starts to embed in our mind that we have to all step up and be responsible for the type of relationships that we want, whether there's an intercultural dimension or not. So what is it? It's a set of capabilities. It's not just one thing. Yes, it can be measured, which is what I like about it. It's an evidence-based construct. It's a set of capabilities that have been proven to predict success in situations characterised by cultural diversity. Proven to predict success. And the only companies or the only types of institutions that really have gravitated to this over the last 20 years, because that's how old this construct is companies where their bottom dollar is at risk. If an Australian company sets up a company or tries to get up a project in China, unless they make intentioned efforts to learn about Chinese culture and to build relationships, they are doomed to fail. Think about the likelihood that in a country like Australia, you're going to probably be in a relationship with someone who's culturally different than you, even if you were both born here. You're encultured. Being born here doesn't automatically make you an individualist. If your parents and their parents and their parents and their parents were all collectivists, you are now fluent in those scripts, as well as being bicultural, having an idea about how to function in a very highly individualist society. This model, this is the set of capabilities. What I love about this is the construct of motivation. I wish some of our politicians were motivated to know about cultural similarities and differences without the rhetoric. It's motivation, intrinsic. This is the right thing to do. We should be taking responsibility for the type of relationships we create. Our world depends on it. It's really that simple. But it's okay if you want to make some dollars. So you're extrinsically motivated. You know that you could get a promotion or that your project will succeed if you're able to embed this model. Great. And a belief in yourself, a belief in your own ability to do intercultural relationships. And of course, cultural knowledge, so CQ knowledge. That is our knowledge of cultural similarities and differences. We don't have to know all about every single person's culture in the world, but there are so many tools for us to dig deeper, and we should be. And we'll rarely get it when we're at university or in our workplace, and if it's on our workplace, it needs to be have a little bit more depth than something like Harmony Day, which celebrates the surface level, the visible culture. We need to create spaces for interaction where we drill deep. We have to drill deep here first. Strategy. Sometimes we have to change things. That means get off autopilot. Like the fish jumping out of water, get off autopilot. Be conscious about, step back and think, is there a cultural dimension? Is there something that I'm missing here? And plan and adapt and revise and action. Implement all of that. That means sometimes we've got to change the way that we communicate so that we succeed. If culture affects us at breakfast, imagine all the other parts of the day in which it comes into play. It influences the way that we lead, the way that we parent, the way that we partner. I know as a mother, I want to leave a better world for my children, and I don't want to leave it to chance when there's methodologies out there and frameworks that we can embed in schools, and we can embed in social services, and we can embed in hospitals and the health system to reduce disparities. If the framework's there, why aren't we using it? I'll leave you with a question. Who are you? It's a common question. But who are you culturally? You're a cultural being. And if I leave you with one message, I am, you are, we are products of our cultural backgrounds. Thank you.